Welcome back to the Daily Drum on WHUR and Sirius XM Channel 141. This is the Inside segment. I'm Harold Fisher. The big dig out continues across the DMV as the region recovers from that 1-2 punch from the winter storm. And there's talk that we just might get another storm by the end of the week. Well, tonight we have some snow safety and survival tips and a realistic look at when we can expect streets, sidewalks, and buildings to be cleared. We have several guests who will be joining us over the next 45 minutes, but we begin with Delano Hunter, Director of the DC Department of General Services. This agency is charged with managing the city's buildings, including schools and recreation centers. And we are talking about some 35 million square feet of property. Director Hunter, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Let me first ask you about how things are looking today and what has been the plan of action over the past 24 hours now.
Thank you. We're confident that we will be ready for schools to open tomorrow, for our recreation centers and our senior wellness centers to get back to the vital work that they do on a daily basis. With regards to our strategy, we sort of shifted around noon yesterday when the snow ended. The first, I want to say the 36 preceding hours, it was all about keeping our police stations and fire stations up and running, ensuring that they had safe passage and access for their emergency vehicles, our homeless shelters, other critical services that did not close during the storm. Now we've shifted as of 12 o'clock yesterday, almost working around the clock to get those schools, recreation centers, and those wellness centers up and running in time for operations tomorrow. Ultimately, it is the mayor's decision, but we want to make sure that our facilities are in the best possible condition. And right now, we're about 80% complete. So it's a very tedious process, over 700 locations. It's heavy manual labor of digging out this snow, which is more like ice, especially with the compaction. But it's work we know need to happen, and we embrace it.
It's interesting because when people think of municipalities, DC or otherwise, most people think of clearing streets through the work of the Department of Public Works. They don't really think about what buildings need to address. And so once you move from the street to access to these buildings, sidewalks and other things, give me a brief checklist of the preparations that are made when you know the snow is coming for the building sites.
That's right. It first starts with a heavy pre-treatment of the driveways, the entryways, the steps, the sidewalks, and the pre-treatment is good for about the first 2 inches, right? So you'll see like that heavy salt. We like to say, hey, we like to make it crunchy, right? So you'll see like that heavy blue and white salt that blankets those surfaces on the school. That helps us for the first 2 inches, right? Then after that, when you have a snow of this magnitude of 6 to 7 inches, after that, while it helps, you got to go out there and you got to dig that out. So it's really important as we think about operations tomorrow, not just entering the building, but in case there's an emergency, you want to be able to get out. What about our ADA entrances? What about our parking lots that support teachers and trash pickup, delivery, food delivery service? All of those are really important in order to have safe operations at a school.
What about the HVAC systems and some of the more parts of these buildings which may be affected by the snow that people may not necessarily see? Is that within your purview?
It is. And while what I'm really proud of is that for the past 3 years, we've invested regularly and steadily in preventative maintenance. And it pays off during periods like this of extreme weather, I'll call it. And I classify that when you have sustained below freezing temperatures, you have a wind chill of what we have in the single digits. It really stresses the HVAC system. It really stresses a boiler system. But because we've been doing regular preventative maintenance, we don't see as many outages, right? We're very proud of the fact that during the midst of the storm, our shelters, our fire stations, our police stations, they all maintain heat. for our schools, we expect the same. If there is an instance, we have staff that has been deployed, that we will deploy, that'll put contingencies in place. So we're confident that when students enter into schools tomorrow, they'll enter in comfortable temperatures that are conducive for learning.
Yesterday, the mayor made a really interesting comment where she was saying that this is the first real snowstorm that the region, and specifically from her perspective, the District of Columbia, has seen in 3 years. And so the comment that she made was, we had to make sure we are not rusty, because it is, I would imagine, very easy after a year or two. Well, no heavy snow this year, no heavy snow the next year. And then here we go. It can be possible that if you're not on top of things, you could get rusty.
No, that's real. I am a proud, I'll call it a proud alum of Snowmageddon.
Yeah. What, Snowmageddon 1 or 2?
That's right, both, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so, I've been around for a while, and you're absolutely right. When we have these periods, 2009, 2010, of course, 2016, they stick out, right? Those are the storms that you remember. And you're right, it's an entire operation. I mean, we have basically slept, ate, and have breathed snow for the last 96 hours in terms of our preparation. And logistically, there are challenges, right? You have new vendors, you have new facilities. So fortunately, but because this is the benefit really of Harold, of having a 3-term mayor. There's not to be political, but when you have a 3-term mayor, you have tenure. You have folks who have been around. And for us, what we're seeing now is just the ability to flex those muscles again, right? But there are challenges. We have new facilities, new shelters, new locations that we have to ensure being covered, right? Operations are more dynamic. There's more real estate, more square footage. So that is a normal process that happens.
Let's talk about expectations, because as we saw yesterday during the first snow, everybody is talking about, oh, we haven't had snow. Let's bring some snow in here so that we can take pictures and put it on Instagram and go out and have the snowball battles. Okay, I think that lasts for about 2 or 3 hours. But then when the reality sets in that you're not going to be able to move about as you did just 2 days ago, what are the expectations? I mean, I know there has to be a goal, but how do you balance the goal with the realities of the weather? It's another cold one today.
Yeah, that's right. I think, always the goal is to get open as quickly as possible, right? Because these aren't just schools, right? They're places where people receive, they're safe environments for our youth. Also, many receive meals there. The same with our recreation centers and senior wellness centers. These are hubs of connectivity within our community. So we recognize just how important it is. While snow may be a fun day for some, for others, they have to figure out, where do I get that meal that I depend to have at school or at a recreation center? Or, it may be an opportunity or they may have missed out on an opportunity for fellowship and socialization and positive reinforcement and personal development. So that's why it's really, really important that we open up as quickly as possible, right? But you have to balance that with safety, right? How can folks navigate the city safely? And I think of it in 3 components, right? The first are our roadways, right? You see the work of DDOT, Department of Transportation, and DPW, the Department of Public Works. I think those primary and secondary roads look really good, right? They're working on those tertiary roads. Then also we have a role to play to ensure that we're prepared just to receive our constituents and our residents so they can access those vital services. And I would say the last component, one that I would challenge listeners and business owners, we all have to make sure that our front walks in front of our homes and businesses are clear, because that's important as well, right? And all of those play a component in folks being able to navigate our city to be connected to the services that they need.
You mentioned something just now that struck me, and historically, and of course, this is standard practice across the country, and it has been for years, for roads, primary roads, secondary roads, and then the rest. But in your position, is there a standard practice? Is there what's the number 1, number 2, and number 3 for you?
Well, during the storm, the first priority were our first responder sites, right?
Okay.
We need to be able for fire trucks to be dispatched, and they responded to fires, right? Ambulances have to be dispatched for medical calls, right? Our police officers have to respond to accidents and calls for services, but also our 911 call takers over at the Unified Center of Communications. They have to be able to get to work, right? There are homeless shelters that are operating. There are mental health services that the district offers. Though that work has to go on rain, sleet, or snow. So there was an around-the-clock effort, very late. I say that mobilization started Sunday morning with the pre-treatments, and it continued overnight into Monday morning during those snowfall to make sure that those services were not disrupted. And then we sort of shift once the snow stops. Then at that point, we shift to our schools, our recreation centers, and our senior wellness centers. For all the reasons that we've discussed, they're more than just schools. They're more than just recreation centers. They are hubs that are vital to connecting residents to other services that they need, from food and nutrition to personal development and the like.
Yeah, that's interesting because I never knew that. And I often wondered what was the priority and kind of the standard practice. And that does make sense. If your first responders can't get out, then the city falls apart.
That's right.
Yeah. So that really does make sense. Now, here's the other question. How do you balance the health, welfare, and safety of your workers with the job? Because as you said, this has been round the clock work. These are not robots. These are people. And some of them have been with the department for a while. You have some of the more seasoned workers, I'm sure, mixed in with the young ones. So what's your call to action? What is your speech to them about taking care of themselves as they try to take care of the city?
Thanks for calling that out, because I think that they're the unsung heroes, right? Those folks that are manning those snow plows, that are shoveling, that are placing down salt, that are working this equipment. They truly are the unsung heroes. And not just in government, but you even see those private facilities, those businesses, right, that are being responsible. Thank you for calling that out. From my standpoint, I know if I can give them what they need to do the job correctly, then they will take care and handle business, because they're public servants, right? And they are committed to the District of Columbia, and I've been inspired by their example. So what do I mean by equipment? Things like four-wheel vehicles, right? Front loaders to load in salt into these devices so they aren't doing it by hand. Proper snow shovels, boots, coats, protective gear. And then also having what I call like a waved approach, right? Meaning that, again, folks aren't robots. Folks are already working 12-hour shifts. It's important to cycle them out with fresh bodies, right? It's important that we work in waves. So I mentioned we have almost 250 personnel. They're working around the clock, but they're going out in shifts in a sense, right? So we'll always have a plan of attack, and then we can cycle in fresh bodies.
Excellent. One final thing, and this has to do with expectations. Even as some areas are cleared, you got to put the snow somewhere. And again, this is obviously not just about GSA, but it's Public Works. It's about a Department of Transportation. Is there a plan to address the difficulties of storing snow until it melts? Where do you put the stuff? I mean,
yeah, we work closely with the Department of Public Works, and we've pre-identified various locations across the city to store snow. One of the ripples this year that may not have been is always a consideration is we have an inauguration to prepare for, right? And then typically with the influx of visitors in the city, those buses will park in the RFK lot, right? So we aren't using RFK, but we've located other locations around the district. Also, because we've declared a snow emergency and we can now shovel from curb to curb, you don't have to worry about, blocking folks in with snow. So some of that snow will stay there on those streets as well. So it's a very thoughtful approach. Again, it's a muscle that we've had to now flex again after a few years. But again, these organizations and these agencies, they have been very strategic and very purposeful in executing our snow plan this year.
Delano, thank you so much for spending some time with us today and kind of explaining how these things work. Delano Hunter with the DC Department of General Services. We are going to take a quick break, but don't forget you can hear this and every edition of the Daily Drum Insight segment via podcast on WHUR.com. The Original Quiet Storm with Raheem Devon is next on WHUR. I'm Harold Fisher. This conversation continues on Sirius XM channel 141 and 96.3 HD2 in just a few seconds. Welcome back to the Daily Drum on Sirius XM channel 141. I'm Harold Fisher. We are continuing our discussion about snowstorm safety and survival tips. Joining us now is Regina Ali, Manager of Public and Government Affairs for AAA. Hey, Regina.
Hi, Harold. How are you?
I'm doing just fine, but a lot of people are not, because as we see every year when we have heavy snowstorms and icy conditions, people are trying to figure out how to drive in those conditions, and they are not doing it very well at all. Talk to me about what people need to do even before they get into their cars to get out in this kind of weather.
Yeah, so you're 100% right. So we haven't had snow like this in our region for some time, right. And it never seems to amaze me or cease to amaze me that once we have it, we still seem like there are many people that have forgotten how to kind of navigate the snow and the ice. So we certainly know that it's very dangerous on the roadways, but a few things before we even get to the roads, as you mentioned. You want to make sure that your car is in good shape. So you want to make sure that your battery is in good shape. So for pretty much every 10-degree drop in temperature, you will see that your tires lose about a pound of air pressure. So your tires we want to look at for temperatures, I want to say below 32 degrees. We see that your battery is impacted by about 35%, that it loses, that capability. And if we're at 0 degrees, your battery is going to perform about 60% less than normal. And you also want to be mindful that the typical battery lifespan is only about 3 to 5 years. So if your battery is older than 5 years, you might want to get it checked out, particularly in light of, though we're still sort of navigating the aftermaths of this storm, it sounds like there certainly could be some more precipitation later in the week. And it's early in the winter, so we might have to deal with this a few more times before spring.
Talk to me a little bit about even some of the basics, and I think this is a really big pet peeve for a lot of people, about the importance of clearing snow off your vehicle entirely.
Absolutely. So, we always say everyone doesn't have the luxury or flexibility to park in a garage or in some sort of covered space or in a parking garage. That being said, it's imperative. I don't care how little snow is on your vehicle, to clear your vehicle off completely before you take to the roads. It's particularly dangerous with larger SUVs or trucks where you have this huge mass of snow or ice on the top of the vehicle. And that is a hazard. It's not only a hazard to other drivers, it could potentially be a hazard to you, depending on which way that snow or ice falls. Once you take off and you're driving, and that snow or ice could become a projectile, impacting the visibility of the vehicle behind you, the driver behind you, perhaps oncoming traffic. It is very, very dangerous. It can cause drivers to have to swerve into oncoming traffic because you're not expecting to see. I know if I see a vehicle and I'm like, oh, they didn't clean their vehicle. Yeah. Let me get away from them. Yeah, I just want to get away from them as quickly as possible. But yeah, we have to, the laws vary from state to state and across the region, but the reality is you need to clean off your car.
Yeah. Is there anything that one should keep in their vehicles if they're going to be out, all day, and you really don't have a good idea about what kind of weather is coming your way? And I don't mean to sound overly dramatic, but we do know that there are times when people can get stuck in the snow.
Of course, of course. And we saw that, just 3 years ago in our region when we had that huge snowstorm and I-95 was shut down for many, many hours in Virginia. And we love to tell people, you always want to have an emergency kit in your car. What you have in the car in the winter is a little bit different than what you would have throughout the rest of the year. But in the winter, there's some things you definitely want to have. You may think you're just running a quick errand, and God forbid there's a crash or something, and next thing you know, you're stuck in traffic, unable to move for 2 to 3 hours. So you want to make sure that you have a blanket, some gloves, that you want to have jumper cables in your car. We're talking about snow and ice, particularly at this time of the year. You want to have something with a little bit of traction that would provide you traction should you become stuck, whether that's sand or salt or kitty litter, something that would provide traction for you if you become stuck on snow or ice. You also want to have flares. Some sort of emergency in case you break down at the side of the road, that other vehicles can see you and that you're visible to them. You also want to have gloves, snacks, water, non-perishable snacks. And if you're out with your pet or your kids, whatever, make sure that you have snacks for them as well. But definitely gloves and blankets or a sleeping bag. Some of those things are very important to have as part of your emergency kit. You want to have a fully charged telephone as well, or at the very least, a phone charger.
You know, it's funny you should mention that. I don't know if you're familiar with this. I kind of stumbled upon this gadget, for lack of a better term, and it's a box that you can charge, and it has an air pump. It has the things where you can jump your battery. It also has plugs to keep your phone charged. Are you familiar with those at all?
I've seen something like that similar. I can say I don't know that we have those in our AAA stores. I can say in our AAA stores we have across the region emergency kits with a lot of those things. But I think I know what you're talking about. I think I've seen that on Amazon. I don't believe we have that, but that is certainly definitely something useful that can help you charge a variety of whether it's your battery, your cell phones, your chargers, things like that. Yes.
And I will say there are more than a dozen different kinds and different brands and what have you. And I've not had to use it other than to inflate my tire when the tire pressure was low, which prevented me from having to get change and go find a pump, an air pump,
right? Exactly. Yeah.
But I will say I was confident enough in this rechargeable gadget thing that I bought one for my daughter and my nephew, both of whom are young drivers.
Very nice. Yeah. And that's a good thing. It's funny you mentioned young drivers, because lots of times, we get our kids all prepared to drive and we go through the whole making sure they know about safety on the roadway, which is paramount. But sometimes we don't prepare them for what to do in inclement weather, what to do if one breaks down. I like to mention that we obviously at AAA are very busy when the weather is cold. We're very busy when the weather is hot. But I know last winter, just in our region alone, AAA came to the aid of about 268,000 drivers in the region. Love to remind drivers that particularly in Virginia and in Maryland, if there is the law, so the slow down, move over law is prevalent in every single state, as well as the district, where if you see an emergency vehicle on the side of the road, it's incumbent upon you to slow down and move over lane. This is usually more or less for highways or where there are roadways with at least 2 lanes. But in Virginia and in Maryland, that law not only applies to our first responders, which shout out to the first responders. Today is First Responder Day. Yes. So for first responders and tow truck drivers, but also in Maryland and Virginia, and probably about at least 24 other states across the country, that law applies to disabled drivers at the side of the roadway as well. So unfortunately, we hear a lot about people getting injured at the side of the road. So you want to make sure that you're slowing down and moving over at least 1 lane when you see not only our tow truck drivers, not only our police and first responders, but other motorists as well.
short of not being out on the road at all, but if you have to go out,
Mm-hmm.
can you talk to us a little bit about driving in these icy conditions? And do you believe that people are putting too much trust in four-wheel drive or front-wheel drive vehicles?
I do. I absolutely do, because the reality is you can slide on the ice no matter what type of vehicle you have, no matter how large or small that vehicle is. So we always want to remind people not to be overconfident because they have an SUV or a pickup truck. Unfortunately, those vehicles can slide as well. So first and foremost, if you have to go out, we recognize, sometimes you have to go out in this weather. There are a lot of people that we need to be out there when the weather is bad. You want to make sure you're reducing your speed, because obviously everything is a little, could be slick, especially if there's snow covered roads. You want to reduce your speed. You want to accelerate slowly. You want to decelerate slowly. If you happen to hit a patch of ice, whether it's a big sheet of ice or a little patch of black ice, you want to turn your car. If you start to skid, into the direction of the front of your car, the direction you want the vehicle to go. So release your foot from the accelerator gradually, and then sort of turn into the skid, for lack of a better term. Turn your vehicle that way, the front of your vehicle. So you want to increase your following distance. So you don't want to obviously tailgate somebody when it's snowing or icy, especially because it takes certainly more time to stop in these inclement conditions.
One of the other things that AAA has been talking about, and that is frozen pipes. Usually when you think of AAA, you think of automobile issues, right, and issues on the road. But why is AAA talking about the frozen pipe issues, and what are you advising?
Sure. So we certainly know that AAA is very engaged with road safety, but we also offer insurance, and we love to use the opportunity with these frigid conditions that are apparently going to be with us for at least the remainder of this week and perhaps beyond, to remind homeowners that certainly the cold weather can wreak havoc on your cars, on your vehicles, on our roadways, but it can also have an impact on your home, particularly as it relates to your pipes. So we want to make sure that people are doing their best to prevent having their pipes frozen at all to start with. That's really important. And there are a couple little tips you can do to sort of help keep those pipes from freezing at all. You also want to make sure that everyone in your family knows where the water shutoff valve is and how that works. You want to insulate your pipes in your home's crawl spaces and in your attic. Seal gaps around your pipes that allow cold air inside. Particularly look for air leaks around electrical wiring or where your clothes dryer vents and pipes are, and use caulk or insulation to keep the cold out.
Yeah, those pipe insulation blankets or coverings or what have you. I mean, they're pretty simple from what I understand.
That's what they say. That's what they say, Harold. Let me call that to my husband.
You're not, yeah, I know. You're not doing any of that. So.
I leave that to my husband. I guess it's easy.
Yeah, tell him to call me. But
no, I mean, trust me, we do have a lot of our pipes are insulated. But you know what? When I was like kind of looking and looking at some of our tips, I found this one to be an interesting one because I know in my kitchen, like if I'm in my island and my dryer is on in the basement, I can smell like the laundry detergent coming through and feel that heat. And one of the tips is to sort of leave your cabinets open. Yeah. So that it allows the heat to reach sort of uninsulated pipes located under sinks and cabinets and things of that nature. So I said, I like that. I can do that, Harold. I can do that.
Yeah, exactly. And again, depending on how your home is made, and particularly for older homes, and this is something that I have discovered because I live in an older home, is that my hot water pipes,
Mhm.
because I have radiator heat,
Mhm.
they run under the bathroom floor.
Wow.
So
Look at that.
my bathroom floors are heated.
Nice and warm, right? And toasty. I remember those nice houses. My grandma had one of those. The floor was always nice and toasty.
Yeah, that's right. People pay a lot of money for that. I was just lucky. Look,
Yes.
Regina Ali, thank you so much for sharing these safety and survival tips for this weather. Look, you stay safe as well.
You stay safe. Thank you for the opportunity. Talk to you soon.
All right, thank you.
Thank
Well, finally, we must address health-related issues during this snowy weather. Dr. William Strudwick is the chair of emergency medicine at Howard University Hospital. He joins us now. Dr. Strudwick, thank you again for spending some time with us. We really appreciate it. Before we get into some of the issues, I'm sure that even today you are seeing snow-related health concerns in the emergency room. What are you seeing
Oh
or
yeah,
hearing about?
yeah. So yeah, thanks for having me. I remember about 6 months ago we were together talking about the heat, right?
Right, exactly.
So yeah, there are, even though winter weather looks beautiful, the snow is pristine, and kind of takes care of all the imperfections. It is dangerous. So there's certain health conditions that we look out for in the emergency department, and that we're prepared to take care of in the emergency department. Um, not the least of which is hypothermia. When your body gets below 95 degrees, it can cause certain symptoms like confusion and shivering, slurred speech, and profound fatigue, and it actually can be life threatening. Also, frostbite. We see people, especially in the extremities, their fingers, their toes, their ears, where the tissue actually freezes and devitalizes, and you could potentially lose your fingers and lose your toes, and that's not something that we see unusually in the emergency department.
How do you prevent hypothermia?
Right. So being prepared, and as as I mentioned, it looks beautiful from the perspective of being in the house, and you can look out and see everything look the winter wonderland. But let's say that you're homeless, or let's
Mm.
in an apartment and your electricity or your heat isn't working properly, um, then that's when you're at risk. That's when you're vulnerable. So the way is to get shelter, to get heat, to dress properly, to dress in. Um, and certainly in Washington D.C., we have a lot of resources. If people do not have appropriate shelter, there's hotlines to call, and people that will come and support. There's shelter hotlines and transportation to places where you won't be vulnerable.
If I may interrupt, earlier today, when I was speaking with Delano Hunter, who is the director of the district's GSA, the General Services Administration, he did want me to mention that for those people who are unhoused, or if you know of someone who is unhoused, who may be having some shelter challenges, or somebody on your street that you may see, call 311. And that was the thing that he wanted us to make sure that we got out, that you call 311, not just, as we know, some people who are homeless do have access to phones. And so, and in emergency situations such as what you're mentioning, frostbite, hypothermia, they've got to get into a warming space. And so I'm glad that you did mention it, so that we could mention that for the district and other jurisdictions in the DMV, that 311 is the magic number for so many services that you may need just below that 911 emergency call line.
Correct. And we don't encourage people to come, say, to the emergency department when they're unsheltered. But sometimes that's a place of last resort, and we
Hmm.
patients commonly on a regular basis that come to the emergency department for shelter. And what we do, we try to use the appropriate resources on them. They're not there for a medical reason. They're there to get support with shelter. So we are able to use a hotline in the emergency department, and they come and pick up patients and take them to appropriate shelters. What I do say to some of those people that come in is like, you don't have to say that you have chest pain or abdominal pain or something that traditionally allows you to be in the emergency department for an extended period. You can say you're here for shelter, and then we'll act appropriately, and sometimes getting social services involved.
Let me ask you this: when you were talking about hypothermia and frostbite, even low levels of it, is that a hospital visit, or can these things be addressed at home?
It depends on the degree. If you find somebody that's outside, has been exposed for an extended period, conscious, unable to care for themselves or rise and ambulate, certainly that's an emergency that you would call 911 for, and they require hospital care. Certainly, if you're out sledding or enjoying activities and your fingers get cold, your toes get cold, your body gets cold, certainly you have the ability to go into a warm environment or ask for help. And that's that's the lower level exposure that can progress to something significant, but has not at that point.
But just warming up, I mean, just going into a warmer space, certainly that's one thing. But if you do have some low levels of frostbite, can that still be treated at home? And if so, how?
That's absolutely. I mean, I would hesitate to call it frostbite.
Hmm. Exposure, then. Yeah.
Exposure, yes, you can treat that at home. Go into a warm environment. Warm blankets. Gradually make sure that you warm yourself up, and that should be adequate for that care for those low level exposures.
Okay. I do want to talk about some of the other health things related to the stormy weather. And we talk about this every year, but I think that it's important to discuss it again. Uh, w- the shoveling snow, and this particular snow is not super heavy, but we are still really kind of in the middle of winter, and we're expecting some snow later on this week and could get some obviously later on this month and next month. How do you recommend that people address shoveling snow, and what are the kind of risks of overexertion?
So yeah, that's a big one. We do see patients commonly coming into the emergency department with cardiac events from shoveling snow. Um, the district and other jurisdictions say, you're supposed to clean your pathway. The mailman has to come, and you want to be
Right.
safe. Um, so people who are deconditioned, who haven't been working out, who may have cardiac issues or other health issues, sometimes feel compelled to go out and shovel their snow, uh, and they have cardiac events or they have heart attacks. Very, I'm not saying that it's very common, but it's not unusual to see that. So, certainly if you're deconditioned, you should, if you have the option of having somebody shovel the snow for you, maybe a kid in the neighborhood. But if you do have to shovel the snow yourself, take your time. Stretch, get prepared. Start off slow. Push the snow rather than like lifting it. Um,
Hmm.
and take breaks. Shovel for a while, then come inside. Certainly there shouldn't be a rush to get it all done at one time, but you know, um, just take your time and don't overexert yourself. Certainly the cold causes vasoconstriction, it causes the heart to beat faster, and the exertion does that as well. So if you do have heart disease, it can exacerbate it, and you can have an event. So be very careful from that perspective.
Because I would imagine also that even for someone who may be physically fit, say somebody who goes to the gym regularly 3 times a week, uh, and they hit the treadmill, they're hitting weights, but shoveling snow is still a highly specific and one could argue an unnatural body movement.
Correct. Yeah. So some other advice, because certainly maybe your cardiovascular system is good. You're in shape, um, but your mechanics when you're shoveling snow is not good. Meaning that you're bending your back instead of bending and picking up the snow.
Bending your knees, yeah.
Uh, Correct. And so you can be prone to injuries, back injuries, back strains, knee strains, hip strains. So you want to make sure, as I said before, stretch, get prepared, start off slow. Don't bend your back, bend at the knees, and try, not to pick up heavy loads of snow. Do a bit at a time, or push it out of the way instead of picking it up and tossing it, which is like you said, it's an unusual movement, kind of unnatural movement.
Mm. What do you say to those people who are exercising, the joggers and the bikers? Although it's beyond me why someone would attempt to ride a two-wheel bike when there's ice and snow, but I guess that's another conversation. But I've always wondered about those who are inhaling cold air briskly and frequently as they're jogging. Is there any health risk to all of that?
As I mentioned before, the cold weather can cause vasoconstriction. It can increase your blood pressure. So if you're going to have some type of event, it could be more likely in the cold environment. Um, Certainly people are in shape and people want to continue.
Hmm.
What I would say for those folks is just be safe. You don't want to run in shoes that don't have good traction. You want to make sure you take the appropriate, kind of short, choppy steps to make sure that you don't slip and fall. Because one of the other big issues is slip and falls.
Ah, yes.
you know, During this time of the year, we see broken hips, we see broken wrists, we see head injuries commonly. Not necessarily in this type of snow because it's kind of fluffy, but it's just getting started this year. We're going to have ice storms, we're going to have icy conditions. And when we have those conditions, we have a lineup of people coming to the emergency department with fractures. So, yeah, if you're in shape, you do what you have to do, for your, your mental and physical and spiritual positivity. But be safe. And
I think that's a great place to end this conversation. Dr. William Strudwick, Howard University Emergency Medicine, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, sir. And you be safe too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure thing. That is the Daily Drum for this Tuesday, January 7th, 2025. I'm Harold Fisher.